And we're back with the latest episode of Let Me Be Frank. And we're a bit nervous today. We're just trying to crack this broadcasting game a wee bit, and we've got a national treasure, broadcasting legend, the one and only Jim White has come on to Let Me Be Frank. Jim, what a pleasure.
Yeah, what an honour, son. Thank
Simon,
you.
Frank, let me be Frank. This is great. It's a pleasure, guys.
Oh, thank you. It's great to have you on, mate. And just your career is like, wow. We could go for days talking about your career, but we'll just stick it in 40 minutes.
I'm amazed that he's found time to come on, because you seem to be omnipresent, Jim. Although you're kind of your show on TalkSPORT is late morning to early lunchtime, so you hopefully we haven't eaten into your day too much.
No, Simon, not at all. It's a pleasure. I mean, I'm sitting here in South Bank in London. I can see the news building from here. I can see the 17th floor of the news building where Simon Jordan and I broadcast from in the morning. So it was just a walk back around here, and I'm delighted to be with you. You and I go back a long way, Simon, as do Frank and I. So it's a pleasure to be with you guys.
Yeah. Well, we were just discussing before they started recording how Johnstone, the town of Johnstone, plays a big part in all of our lives. Yes. So you were Johnstone advertiser. I started off at the Johnstone Gazette. Frank started at Johnson Borough.
Yeah,
ago. And he joined. He signed for Johnson Borough from the 200 club in Kirkintilloch.
I played one game for it was one of them. The Celtic game got cancelled, and someone asked me to go and play, and they would get me a couple of beers after the gym. And that's how my career started. There was 5 scouts watching the boy I was playing against. Talk about luck.
Aye.
I don't know what happened to that. I don't know what happened to that boy, but
the deal basically, Johnson Borough paid £500 for Frank. I wonder, for a bit of fun, you're in the Sky Sports News studio and you've just been sent a text to say Frank McAvenny has joined Johnson Borough for £500. How would you tell the country?
You wouldn't know this guy.
Simon, I would normally get text messages on my phone, and while I'm sitting there, Harry Redknapp would regularly send me messages, and then I'm seeing one now, and this is a big bit of news, and it involves Johnstone Borough. They have forked out £500 for Frank McAvenny. Remember the name, McAvenny. I think he's one for the future. £500, Johnstone Borough. Big deal gone down there. That's the latest breaking news from Renfrewshire.
Brilliant.
What we can do is we'll maybe get the boys in the studio to put the ticker tape along the bottom as well. You know, that's brilliant.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
But so those early days in Johnstone, you were saying to me that Johnson Advertiser, St Mirren was the big club, the Renfrewshire club, and you did you have dealings with Sir Alex Ferguson back in those days? Can you remember?
Yeah, I remember Simon going along to the training ground and speaking to Alex Ferguson, and I was 20, 21. And he came up to us, and I said, this is for the Johnstone Advertiser. Just a quick word. I'm not going to keep you long. And he looked at me and he said, "You're bloody right. You're not going to keep me long." And I remember being terrified then. And he had that effect on you. He still has that effect on people today. When he speaks, you listen. And I love that. But I love being part of it. I love being part of that newspaper and trying to get stories into the paper, getting that competitive edge, trying to work out what journalism was all about. And so in my very early days, getting in front of Alex Ferguson, he was very good to me. I remember that. Jim Clooney was another manager around that time. And because of that, I've always had a soft spot for St Mirren. And I mean that. I like the club and I like the people. I like Paisley. It seems so long ago now, guys. So long ago.
Jim Clooney signed me, Jim. And
did
he signed me and get sacked the following morning.
Did he? No, it's a direct result.
Yeah, I don't know. He didn't even see me train.
Brilliant.
Well, I wanted to ask you, Jim.
I love St Mirren. I really like the club.
Yeah, great club. I had 5 seasons there, Jim. They were magnificent. Honestly, they were superb. Great family club. And that's what I say. We used to get Europe every year.
Yeah, Well, some of the names that have passed through that club, and I still remember with great fondness, Frank, long conversations with like Tony Fitzpatrick, just like Billy Abercrombie, people associated with the football club, Jim Clooney, Alex Ferguson. and I really liked it, and I loved it when they won the Scottish Cup, and that was Ian Ferguson's day. I loved that. So yeah, terrific club and great people.
That was the season when I left. I left and they won the cup.
Well, no, I still look for their result. I still like them a lot. Obviously, I should make more of an effort when I'm back up there to go to a game or two. But time is tight these days.
I know.
Now, I wanted to go back to even earlier than that, Jim, because you were a smart boy at school, Kelvinside Academy, is that correct?
I was at Kelvinside Academy, Simon.
Captain.
My mum and dad tried everything. They had to fork out to send me there. My sister went to Westbourne School, and they were so good to us. My dad, Robbie, my mum, Lorna, and I played rugby at school. One of the few times my dad came to see me play rugby, Simon, it was Kelvinside Academy against Glasgow Academy, and I managed to get myself sent off in that game. And I don't think my dad was all that impressed. But it was a rugby playing school. It was a very good school. And I remember how dejected they looked when I said at the end of my 6th year, I think I'm going to go into journalism. I fancy a go at that. I might go through to Napier College in Edinburgh. Yeah. And they were like, journalism, where did that come from? Mm-hmm. But I thought, well, I've got to do something, so why not that? And that's what I did.
So that was going to be my next question. At what point in your kind of teenage years, I suppose, did you decide that was the route you wanted to go down? Was it as at 6th year, was it as late as that, or had you decided before then?
Do you know what? It probably was as late as that, Simon. I had no idea. Like so many kids going through school, you suddenly realise, well, I've got to make a decision here. And I didn't really know what decision to make. And I saw an advert in the newspaper at Napier College, Edinburgh, a pre-entry journalism course. And I thought, yeah, let's have a go at that. And the deal basically was, if you pass the exams, you got a job in a provincial newspaper. So that pass the exams... I mean, the exams, when I think of it, shorthand, 120 words a minute, Simon, thank you.
I did the same one. It wasn't easy. Did you do yours first time? Did you pass first time? I had to do a resit in my 120.
I had many resits, mate. Scots law, all that kind of thing, newspaper practice. I got a job in the Hamilton Advertiser. So I loved that, covering Hamilton Accies, and then the Johnstone Advertiser after that. So I really felt, well, I'm beginning to get somewhere now. And then it was around 1979. I saw an advert in the newspaper, reporter wanted for Scotland Today, the Scottish TV nightly news programme. And I thought, I'll have a go for that as well. And I did.
You did. And was it at that point where you thought, right, I'm going to go down the moustache route?
Yeah. How much of a mistake was that, guys? Honestly.
You kept it for a while.
It was the 80s, wasn't it?
Oh, Frank, you should have pulled me aside, mate, when you first met me and said, get rid of that. I
looked like a porn star. Some of the girls haven't out with moustaches.
It was a shocker. It was a third eyebrow down for a drink. It was dreadful, Frank. I should have got rid of it before I grew it. But anyway, yeah, that was the day of the moustaches, Simon. I looked ridiculous, but all of a sudden I was working in television and I was thinking, well, I'm loving this. Yeah, how is this happening? But it was. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to stay quiet for a wee bit because I'm going to let you guys reminisce about a very important occasion in 1986. I think it might have been one of your first big overseas jobs as a football reporter, the World Cup in Mexico. The man to my left was out there as well. What's your recollections of that? And also the aforementioned Alex Ferguson's decision, maybe not to play Frank as much as he should have.
Should have played me. I mean, I think, as you'll probably know, Jim, if you were to put two strikers together, because it was always 4-4-2, if there was two strikers that were born to play with each other, it was myself and Charlie Nicholas. Because Charlie wanted everything to feet. I was over the top, and it was just, but Ferguson had other ideas. And, he scored 28 goals in the Premiership, was First Division. You want to play, don't you? And Fergie, great tactician that he is, the reason I found out I wasn't playing was he put me in the wall. when you're trained, right, Frank, you go in the wall, and I'm thinking, well, that's me not playing. Thanks, Fergie.
What's your recollections of that job? You must have been really excited. You're still a young man at that point.
Well, I do remember it, Simon. It happened all fairly late on. Scottish TV decided we're going to send you out there. There'd been, if you remember, Frank, there'd been an earthquake out there.
That's right.
And the World Cup finals in 1986 should never really have been held in Mexico. The place was a mess. It was totally disrupted by what had happened. And they sent me out there to do news/sport reporting. But of course, you never say no to that. And it was great to do that. And not long before that, Simon, I'd got to know Souness. I'd been out in Genoa doing a documentary on him. He was playing for Sampdoria post-Liverpool. So Graham and I had got quite friendly. And then, of course, he had got the Rangers job as well. So a heck of a lot had happened in the build-up to that. And a lot had happened for me as well, because Souness phoned me on a Friday night to say, be around next week. I'm going to be around. I'm going to be in Glasgow. You're speaking to the new player manager of Rangers. So that was massive for me.
Wow.
And I got ahead of the pack for that one. But going to Mexico was a great experience. Alex Ferguson, Walter Smith in there, in charge of the team. I agree with you, Frank. I'd love to have seen you play out there alongside Charlie Nicholas. If I remember rightly, in the first game against Denmark, Charlie got carted off. And we lost the game by a single goal to 0. It was a game against West Germany after that, and then Uruguay. Yes. And we had to beat Uruguay, and we couldn't. Gordon Strachan was maimed in the first minute of that Uruguay game. Uruguay gets sent off. It's still a record. It was inside a minute, that red card. Right. And the 11 of us couldn't beat the 10 of them, and Scotland went out early. But it was a hell of an experience for me. I remember it. It was amazing being out there. Well, and I was thinking, wow. That's a World Cup finals in Mexico. I'm never going to forget it.
Yeah. Well, for me, because I was sharing a room with Graham, so I knew about the Rangers thing. And obviously Fergie didn't know about it, because if you remember, Jim, Sir Alex wanted the Rangers job because he didn't have the Man United job at that time. So there was a bit of politics in it. And he didn't. The one guy you want your team against Uruguay is Graham Souness. Yeah. And he didn't play him. Now, I know, you know what I think of Paul McStay, world class. But at that time, I don't think he was ready for that. You know, and if you...
No, you're right, Frank. I do recall that. I think the suggestion was that Graham was having trouble with the heat, as everybody was.
Frank was having trouble with the heat as well, but that's another story.
Yeah. It was a lot...
Maybe he didn't have the energy or the engine for the match against Uruguay, but I think you're totally right, because if there was anybody you wanted in there to mix it up with them, it was Souness. But I can remember it, Frank, in Netza. What a place that was, in the outskirts of Mexico City. Mm-hmm. And they had some tremendous... They had a guy, Enzo Franciscoli. I don't know if you remember him. He was some player. But we couldn't do it. We couldn't beat them. And we came home as a result.
In the last minute.
I remember it vividly.
Stevie Nicol hit the bar in the last minute. He missed a sitter. He missed a sitter quite...
At the top of the bar he hit.
I don't know if he hit... No, I think he kind of babied it.
He should have buried it, and he didn't. And it was such a disappointment. But it was great to get a flavour of that. A World Cup finals for me, going out there with Scottish TV. It was a great experience, and I loved it. I must admit, I absolutely loved it.
So let's talk about your big transfer deadline, your big transfer day, even from Scotland down to England, from Sky. I mean, everyone recognises you from Sky's transfer deadline day, Sky Sports News. What age would you have been at that point? Can you remember?
That's a good question, Simon. So it was some years later. I was at the World Cup in France in 1998. So I was late 30s, coming up 40, and I'd been speaking to Sky. I must be honest. I'd been speaking to them, and at the World Cup, I was thinking, it's a good time to make a move. I was covering the finals for Scottish TV, and the opportunity came along. But I've got to tell you, Simon, you always get a break, and I must admit this was my break in that year building up to the World Cup finals in France. Dick Advocaat, if you remember, he'd been appointed the Rangers manager, and I remember Rangers at that time saying he's still with PSV Eindhoven. No one should go out to Holland because he's not going to do anything until he comes to Scotland. And that'll be at the end of the season, the domestic season. And then he'll speak to the Scottish media. But I decided, no, I'm going to go out there. And I got a cameraman, an ITN cameraman in Amsterdam. And I met him. And Advocaat and PSV Eindhoven were playing a club called Den Bosch in Holland. And I pitched up, and Avocat said, no, you shouldn't have come. No interview. I'm not going to speak until I get to Glasgow. And I said, well, surely you can do something for me. And he said, well, yeah, I made it clear. And I said, yeah, I know. He said, look, we're playing Den Bosch. It's going to be a very tight game in the Dutch Cup. If we win, I'll give you an interview. If we don't, no interview. Is that fair? And I looked at Avocat and I thought, God, he means it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it went to the golden goal. And PSV Eindhoven, who had the likes of Arthur Newman, Jaap Stam playing for them, a Brazilian cropped up called Claudio put the ball in the back of the Den Bosch net. They won, and Avocat said, okay, you win. I'll give you your interview. And I know that was such a break for me because I was the only guy that got the interview with Avocat before he came to Scotland to take over at Rangers. And he was a man of his word, and he did it for me. And that kind of, Sky said to me, we were pretty impressed at how you got that interview with Dick Avocat, but it was pure luck more than judgment. But it helped. And that was a big break. And you know what it's like, Simon, in our game. It was a break that helped me.
Well, yeah, I was actually going to go back a little bit and then come back to your Sky days. But I remember watching you in action close at hand, and you secured a great interview, big exclusive with Paul Gascoigne when he was living in Renfrewshire as well. And we were all there, the press pack were all there, and you managed to secure the deal. I'm pretty sure you had to speak to him through his intercom initially before he said, all right, come up the driveway, Jim.
Yeah, I remember that. You know, Simon, to this day, I still feel a bit guilty to this day because the press back outside his house, and we were part of it. And we're all trying to get the poor guy to speak. And, you know, Gazza, everywhere he went, he got attention, everywhere he went. You to a degree as well, Frank. I mean, you were always big news because you were a big name in the Scottish game. And then, of course, West Ham, and you became even bigger, then came back to Celtic. But, you know, I remember standing outside there and I made it clear to Gazza, look, if you speak to me, I'll be very grateful. I do remember Simon getting in, like the intercom, and he's like, who is it? I said, Jim White, I've got a camera crew, can you let me in, Paul? And the intercom, the gates opened, in we went. And not long after, I spoke to Gascoigne. Jimmy Five Bellies was in the house, and he had the phone to his ear, and he said, Jim, it's for you. And I'm like, really? And I said, yeah, hi. And and this voice came on, and knew right away who it was. Jim, it's Walter Smith. How are you? I said, yeah, fine. Where are you? I said, I'm in Gazza's house. He said, I know. Get out. I always remember it. But I managed to get a few words with Gazza before then, but Walter made no bones about it. You shouldn't be in there. Get out. Leave him be. Yeah. But you know what the game was like, Simon? We're all trying to get the same interviews. Everybody trying to get exclusives. And I was one of them. I was no different. Every now and again, I speak to Gazza. He came on one day, the early days of me being on TalkSPORT, and he paid tribute to the late, great Ray Wilkins. I've never forgotten him for that as well. So if you ask Gazza to do something, by and large, he does it. He's a great guy. He was then, he still is now.
I got a lot of time for Paul. I thought in '91, I thought he was the best player in the world, Jim.
Yeah.
At that time, I thought he was super. And if truth be told, I hope it's a true story, but I heard when he was going to Rangers, Walter went out to Lazio, went out to Italy, and the gates opened and all that, and he says, who is it? And Walter Smith. So Gazza went out and says, what you want? He says, I want to see if you'll come to Rangers. And apparently Gazza says, yeah, and jumped in a quad bike and drove away.
Brilliant.
And Walter's going, what the fuck am I going to do now? So his pals were playing PlayStation, and he came back and he says, what are you doing still here? He says, well, what's the terms? He said, I told you I'd sign. And that's how easy it was. Brilliant.
Brilliant. I mean, I can remember him again. I think I was doing some work for Radio Clyde with Paul Cooney. And Paul said to me, get a radio pack on and try and get behind the scenes after one of the matches Gazza played for Rangers at Ibrox. And he was coming up the tunnel. I don't know how I got into the tunnel, Frank. And Gazza came up and he stops. And they came to me live, and I'm like, well done, Paul. God, star of the show yet again today, blah, blah, blah. And towards the end of it, I said, and now Motherwell. And he said, yeah, my mother's well. Yeah, she's very well. You could never second guess what he was going to say, but tremendous entertainer on and off the pitch. A wonderful guy.
Yeah, I'm so glad he's still about because the world's better for him being about. I love him to death. He's a global superstar, as you say. I mean, he's like, very few people go to Italy like he did, you know. And it's great. And you're talking about Ray Wilkins. I played against him at Rangers. Well, he is. And all of a sudden, you try something and Ray's going, unlucky, Frank. And I was like that. See, taking the piss? Because it's an old firm game.
Aye.
And he's going, keep going. And it was like, he loved football.
Gentleman.
What a gentleman he was. And he just loved
Lovely
football
guy.
and he loved people trying things. And, you know, I thought, wow. So I was heartbroken when he left us. It was a shame.
Oh yeah, that affected me quite badly, Frank. I got to know him down here pretty well. I knew him up in Glasgow. At the time Souness signed him, Frank, I was on the sauce then. And I remember being out at Glasgow Airport. He was coming in from Paris. And I was in the bar at Glasgow Airport, missed his arrival. Had to go back out to Ibrox, back round to Ibrox from the airport, go in. And I said to him, we missed you. Would you mind, Ray, as if you're arriving at Ibrox, can you go up the end of the street and walk in the front door so we can get the establishing shot of you arriving? And he said, yeah, of course I'll do that for you. I mean, I was so embarrassed about it. It should never have happened. But that's the sort of guy Ray Wilkins was. If he could help you, Frank, he would help you. And he did.
Well, talking about Glasgow Airport, I don't know if you remember this. You'd done it with me when I was leaving Celtic, and I was to go down and speak to Arsenal and West Ham. And I was heartbroken because I didn't want, you know, when I signed for Celtic, I thought I was signing for my career. I thought I'd be there till it finished. And obviously, politics, I didn't get paid and all that kind of stuff. But I was in tears. And you had a camera crew and you told them to switch it off. And because I'm sitting in the corner crying. And I thought, you know, thank you very much, you know. This wee boy bubbling in the corner.
No, I remember it, Frank. I remember at the time you were heartbroken because I can remember the relationship you'd struck up with the Celtic fans. Yeah. They absolutely loved you and you loved them. And it was such a big moment for you. And I do remember that. We didn't want to put you under pressure. But Frank, I may say, in all your time that I've known you, you've been absolutely top drawer to deal with. So cooperative. So decent to deal with. But the main thing is you've always just been Frank McAvenny, mate. You've never tried to be anything you're not. What you are is a wonderful footballer and a brilliant person. But you've been brilliant to deal with. And, you know, the very fact that you and I are doing this just now with Simon, it means a lot to me, and I hope it does to you as well, because it means our friendship has lasted so long.
Oh, it's superb. Thank you very much.
That's a wonderful, a lovely tribute, Jim. That's really nice. I'm filling up. Fantastic. But it is, no, listen, I know without everybody kind of blowing smoke and all that stuff, it is true though. I mean, there's a genuine affection for Frank. We've managed to get some guests on to this podcast that I would never have dreamed of being able to get into the studio or on via Zoom. And they all say the same thing. For Frank, you know, I'd walk a million miles. Well, this is the effect you have on people, Frank. You've always just been the same guy who, I mean, am I right? You're always so grateful for the opportunity you were given. And not only Simon is he a hero up there with the Celtic fans. I've said this before. I often get in a taxi down here and the cab driver will be West Ham. And I mentioned Frank McAvenny and off that cab driver will go. Love him. Him and Tony Cotty. Him and Cotty. Love Frank McAvenny. Love him. Honestly, you're much loved down here, Frank, as well.
I know, mate. I know. It's nice to come back down. It really is nice. And still the same. You know, it's still the same.
So we obviously have to talk about your transfer deadline day, and which everyone associates Jim White with. You did it for many, many years. So many memorable moments. You must have a bucket load of highlights from it. But was it a case that you were getting these texts in regularly? I mean, were people thinking of you before anyone else really to get the agents or managers or whatever?
Well, I mean, at the time, Simon, I remember some of the transfer deadline nights were bigger than others. Obviously, I particularly remember the night Berbatov went to United, and we all thought Robinho was going to go to Chelsea. He ended up going to Manchester City with Mark Hughes, and I remember being right in the thick of a lot of those. Arshavin going to Arsenal, Mesut Ozil going to Arsenal. And I can remember going out the following day and people in the street would be peeping their horns down here. And I saw you last night, mate, like whatever supporters of whatever clubs they were. And like if I lose this thing, I'll lose my life. I've got about 3,000 contacts on it. And you know what it's like, Simon, in this business. I mean, had people like Harry Redknapp. I saw Harry this morning. He was in at TalkSPORT. Hasn't changed a bit. He's like, Frank, hasn't changed a bit. And would message me, be helpful with information. And I would go with it. And you trust some people more than others. I was telling somebody the other day, I can remember being on one time, and I remember news came through, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain leaving Arsenal, going to head to Chelsea. And a lot of people were going with that. And I thought, I'm not sure. I'm just, for whatever reason, I wasn't sure about that. And I messaged someone who knew Oxlade-Chamberlain very well, and it came back, don't go Chelsea, go Liverpool. The boy only wants Liverpool. So I was like, it's my understanding that Oxlade-Chamberlain, he's got his heart set in Liverpool, and that's where he wants to go, and that's where he went. So it's stuff like that. That all comes back to me. And these were invaluable moments for me, I must admit. And I'm still associated wearing the yellow tie. I mean, still I can walk into people here in the street here. I'm like, where's the yellow tie? Where's the, even all these years on, and they still talk about it.
I've always fascinated to know who came up with that idea, Jim. Was it you or was it Sky?
I remember, Frank, at the time, they were saying to me, we're going to make a big thing of this. It's like theatre. On the night that players go from one club to another with the clock ticking, and we'll create suspense, etc. And the livery of the studio will be yellow, etc. So I just popped on a yellow tie. And then the breaking news caption across the bottom of the screen was in yellow, a black type on a yellow screen. And yellow became the colour synonymous with transfer deadline day. And then if it was Kirsty Gallagher or if it was Natalie Sawyer, then they'd wear a yellow dress and I'd wear the yellow tie. And it just, honest to God, Frank, the yellow tie is in the National Football Museum in Manchester in a case next to John Motson's sheepskin jacket.
Oh, brilliant.
So that's so good.
Superb. Yeah,
It's
well,
insane,
that's what he's for, the sheepskin jacket, and that's a new with a yellow tie. Brilliant. That's phenomenal.
They were great times. I mean, that really was a great time. One of the standout memories I have, Frank, involved Celtic. And again, I mentioned Harry Redknapp, and he used to leave me a voicemail message, and I used to laugh in the commercial break, listen to Harry, and he'd be like, Jim, Robbie Keane's going up to Celtic from Tottenham, and he's going up there now. He's going to go up. Get that out. He's going to Celtic. I remember saying it, Frank. Celtic fans. Robbie Keane's on his way. Robbie Keane's on it, and there were about 3,000 Celtic fans outside Celtic Park waiting for Robbie Keane. And it's that kind of information that I got, and Harry was so helpful, and so many other people will be helpful. It's just trying to keep ahead of the pack. Sure. But they were fantastic days. They still are. I mean, still do it with TalkSPORT. And it's still as much fun as ever.
I can remember a few kind of late night developments on transfer deadline night, I suppose, at Celtic Park. I think Craig Bellamy was one that springs to mind too. That happened very, very late, They had
exactly that, Simon. I mean, the old firm would play their part in it. Down here, it was just massive. But I think now with the financial restrictions on the clubs aren't spending nearly as freely as they did. But at one time, I mean, millions would tune in, and the impact was massive. For the days afterwards, anywhere I'd go, I saw you the other night. By God, what a night that was! And some of them were busier than others, but they were all special in my eye, in my mind's eye. I can still remember them so vividly. Great fun, great.
So you formed a wonderful partnership with Simon Jordan at TalkSPORT. It's I tell you what, I absolutely, I don't know about you, Frank, but I make sure I listen most days. Yeah. Love listening to you, Jim, obviously, but I particularly like listening to Simon Jordan. I kind of, I think when that guy speaks, sometimes I think he should be in government.
Yeah.
Honestly, he just makes so much sense on a wide range of subjects.
He's so knowledgeable to be on with. Frank, you'd love him. I mean, he talks about Crystal Palace and, of course, his ownership of the club.
I remember at a dinner in Glasgow where you were there with Simon. I said I nearly crashed the car that day. I was talking to Shaban, about the sponsor for the World Cup, and he's saying, well, I take it there wasn't a queue around the buildings. And he said, why don't you just not go? And it was one of them, which is so sensible. It's a good protest if they don't go, if they felt that strongly about it. But he just comes out with these things and you think, yeah, he's right. know,
he's so clever, Frank. I mean, some of the bookmakers run a book down here about what his first catchphrase is going to be. I don't have a dog in that particular fight, or something like that. You know, he throws them in all the time. He's immensely clever. He's so quick. He's ahead of everybody when they're thinking about certain issues that affect the game. And when it comes to football finance, nobody better. He's unbelievable. He's great. I mean, we have a kind of love-hate relationship now and again, because we're in each other's company so much. But he's fabulous to be on with. He really is.
The thing is, when he says something, you'll come back and say something, and he's got an answer for it. He knows what he's, you know, and that's what I like, because you don't let him off with a lot of things.
No, I try not to, and I try to be fair, Frank.
Yeah.
I mean, every now and again he'll say, "Now you're pushing it a bit. Don't be so clever," you know, that kind of thing. But honestly, you'd love him. I remember, Frank, on the day, you guys will recall, Simon, when the Super League, the big story of the Super League broke down here, and the big 6 clubs were talking about joining the Super League and breaking away, etc. And Simon was so ahead of the game that day. And basically his line was, the fans of the 6 clubs will not stand for it. And he was absolutely right. Chelsea fans were demonstrating. There was no way they were going to allow their club to break away. Arsenal fans demonstrated at the Emirates. And Simon was right. The fans of those 6 clubs pulled the brakes on that happening. And it didn't come about. And Simon predicted it.
Yeah, Man United there were an outcry up there, weren't there?
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And Simon was ahead of it. And you just have to be prepared, Frank, because that day, all sorts of things happened. I remember getting a text message from somebody, and Simon was in full flow of on the Super League. And later that week, Tottenham were in the League Cup final. I remember looking at my phone, and I got a message from somebody I absolutely trusted, and it said, "Go with it. Tottenham have just sacked Mourinho."
Wow. Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. And this was all happening at that time. And that was a show I'll never forget. It came off at 1 o'clock. I had to lie down in a darkened room after that one. It was a hell of a day.
It was Daniel Levy, wasn't it? Apparently, if he'd won a cup, he was getting X amount if they sacked him. A few millions.
But the brakes were pulled on that, and Mourinho was sacked before he could get to the Sunday, before he could get to the League Cup final. It was a heck of a day. It really was.
But you've also had to act as almost a boxing referee sometimes, listening to the show, because it can get fairly heated. I think, was it yesterday, Martin O'Neill was on your show, was it possibly Martin Keown?
Yeah, O'Neill and Keown. Oh yeah, it got quite feisty then. It's quite entertaining, actually, Simon. I feel as if I'm at Centre Court in Wimbledon. I'm watching things like this when they're going at each other, you know? It was great. But, I mean, one memorable day in that area was when Simon was on with Eddie Hearn. And they build it that way. Eddie Hearn versus Simon Jordan. Oh, my God, Frank. You should have heard it.
It was great because they were saying who won. They were asking the boxers who won. They were all going, he won that.
They got the scorecard. They were like,
well, that was right. They did a kind of poll at the end of it. Were you Team Hearn? Were you Team Jordan? It was wild. But, you know, they were both up for it, and it was terrific entertainment. But Simon, you're right. I have to say, Simon is unbelievable to be on with. He's a brave guy. He goes into territories that other people probably wouldn't go into.
Sure, no, it's really impressive. And please pass on the regards from the Let Me Be Frank team to him, because he's great to listen to.
How is his health? How is he now?
Yeah, he's good. He's good, Frank. It surprised all of us, not least him, of course, when he had news of that it was a real cancer scare. It was big time, and he had to go in and have surgery. And I remember speaking to him. I was in Spain. I spoke to him the day before he went in to have surgery here in London. And obviously he was well uptight, well nervous, but he came through it with flying colours. And I was so pleased. We're all rooting for him. And he's never looked back. You know, Simon, onward. He's incredible.
A couple of days in the sun every now and then helps, doesn't it? Just nips away to Spain.
He takes himself off out to Marbella and recuperated there. But no, he's in great health, Frank. And he's a big fan of yours, Frank. I have to say, I often tell him about people who have impressed me and made a mark on me over the years. And he listens. He's a great guy, Simon. It's like no one I've ever known.
Brilliant.
You're looking great yourself, Jim.
Yes.
You've been very open and honest over the years about your own kind of struggles with alcohol and so on. You're looking really healthy, really fit. How's life treating you in general?
No, good, Simon. Thank you. On the 28th of this month, I'll be exactly 13 years sober. I thank God for it. I'm very, very grateful because many occasions before that, I embarrassed myself. I embarrassed people who were in my company, and something had to give, Simon. And I had a choice to make, and I made it, and I've never looked back. I can honestly say to you, I don't worry about myself to any degree in that area because I'm so super confident. Because my life is so immeasurably better because of the fact that I'm sober all the time. I might be well boring for everybody else, but it's such a better way to live. And there's hardly a day goes by, Simon, that I wish I hadn't gone sober earlier. I hadn't become sober earlier. I wish I had done. But I feel great, mate. And to everybody out there who's on a similar path, keep going because the rewards are so many. You can't even imagine. It's wonderful. Every day. Life is great, Simon. I really mean that.
Sharing a building with Alan Brazil as well must be tricky in that regard, then I take it.
Well, yeah. You have me extolling the virtues of sobriety. But hey, each to their own. You know, however he wants to live is up to him. However I live is up to me. And we're all in control of our own destiny. So for me, it's just been one of the best things, Simon, I've ever done, if not the best. And I did it for me, but I also realized not long after it, there's so many people in my immediate company benefit as well. Because I can be a pain in the arse without alcohol, Simon, let me tell you.
I know, but the thing is, with that alcoholic people, they've got to want to stop. You know, there's a lot of people that, you know, like Paul Gaskell, we're talking about Gazza, that people kept trying to put him into rehab. And I'm saying, well, unless Paul wants to stop, there's no point in going into rehab because he'll just come out and do it. And people like that. And I think you've really got to want to do it yourself.
Well, you have to, Frank. I mean, I was 5 weeks in Germany with Simon Jordan and TalkSPORT at the Euros there in the summer. And it was full on. We were doing games, we were doing shows Monday to Friday. I was doing the occasional show at the weekend. I took in about 9 or 10 matches. And you had to be on it. You absolutely had to be on your game professionally. And if I was waking up, as I used to, nursing a hangover, I'd be letting my employer down, I'd be letting myself down, and the show would be shit. And I'm so glad that I brought my A game to it. And you get that feeling of achievement all the time, Frank, that you're giving the best version of yourself socially, professionally, and in every which way. And I really do mean it. Anybody listening to this, and Frank, many people will listen to you because they love you, what you and Simon are doing with your podcast and with the show. But if anybody's listening to me now and you ever doubt, I wonder what it would be like if I kicked the booze today. I hope that I'm an example of the fact that do it because you'll never look back. It's the best thing you could ever do. So
That's
do
absolutely
it.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, Jim. One thing I wanted to ask you, actually, going back slightly to the kind of transfer deadline day reporting. I often look nowadays at like social media, Twitter, for example, and you get people like Fabrizio Romano, who always seems to be kind of on the ball and these stories breaking. Does that make life sort of trickier for your kind of TV guys? When you're trying to break story and and they're already broken on Twitter, how does that work for you?
No, I mean it's a good question. Fabrizio Romano's incredible. I mean, he's a one-man industry, and he just makes it. That's his thing, Simon. Transfers, breaking stories, breaking news, all around Europe, all around South America. It's incredible. He's a machine, but there are many parts of that machine working for Fabrizio in various parts of the planet. But no, I think it all adds to it. The more, the merrier. I mean, I'm delighted to say, no doubt, as you did, Simon, in your journalistic days, it's great when you get something that nobody else has got. And you can break that news and break it with certainty. It's still great to do it. When you get an exclusive interview, it's still great to do it. And I used to love that and the feeling that it gave you. So if you keep your edge and you keep that about you, you never know. I mean, I'm often asked, what was the biggest story that you ever had? And I say, and I mean it, I don't think I've had it yet.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had it yet.
Wow.
I think there'll be a story yet that I hope further down the line that I break that might be up there, might be absolutely up there.
Well, if it's
but there have been a few, and you keep going.
Yeah.
If it's Frank McAvenny becoming Celtic manager, I'm going to break it before anyone else.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
there's the story.
I wouldn't have to worry about that.
I know time is tight, and I don't want to keep you for much longer. But I also want to ask you about someone else that you share a building with at TalkSPORT, who has become a broadcasting legend, and that's Ali McCoist. And you've watched close at hand as Ali's, reputation as a journalist and a broadcaster has really grown.
Yeah, it's fabulous, Simon. I saw him this morning in the building. Jordan and I go into the studio as Jeff Stelling and Ali come out. And I've known Stelling for years. I say hi to Jeff. McCoist, always a big embrace. Always, how you doing? He's terrific. I have to say, he's as well known down here as he is up in Glasgow, the west of Scotland, central belt of Scotland. He's incredible. The one wonderful thing about Ali McCoy, Simon, there are many wonderful aspects about Ali. To a degree, he's like Frank McAvenny. Never changes.
No.
He's always the same. What you see is what you get. Never tries to be anything other than what he is. And that's a very hospitable, friendly, honest guy. And he's great. He's terrific. And by God, is he popular. But he's multifaceted. He's become one of the best co-commentators around. If he's co-commentating on a live game, Ali trends on Twitter. He's great. He's wonderful. And one thing I will never forget him for, Simon, Jordan and I went on 10 to 1 one day down the road there at TalkSPORT. And Ali had been on that morning and had come off air. And the sad news came through about the passing of Walter Smith. And Ali was extremely upset in another room, and I knew he was still in the building. But during a commercial break, Simon, I went through to him and I said, look, if you can find a way of coming back into the studio and joining me and Simon and talking about Walter, and I know it's tough, and I totally understand if you can't do it, but if you want to do it, the offer's there. Come through and join us. If not, I totally get it. And about 25 minutes later, the door opens to the studio, and during a commercial break, Ali came in and he sat with us, and I think he spoke for about half an hour about Walter and what Walter meant to him. And I'll never forget his words that day, Simon. He was incredible. And he summoned up the courage and the strength to do it. And it was amazing. Yeah. And he was shattered sitting there. He was shattered by the news that his great friend and former boss had passed away. But he did it, and I've never forgotten him for it. And I love McCoy, says I love McAvenny. Yeah. Special guys.
Yeah, well, it put me off my dinner last night. It was on that one show, and I thought I was having late dinner, and I thought, no. I seen him sitting on the one show, and I was like, that's it, off.
You can't get away from him.
Can't get away from him.
I know, when he's on with Alan Brazil, Frank, I keep on thinking, like they sound like the two of the most Scottish guys you could ever find.
I know,
don't worry about that. No, listen, don't worry about this, don't worry about that. Yeah, we won't worry about that. I mean, they're great together. But McCoist is special. He's a special guy.
Yes.
You also, you over the years have always had a wee bit of a ribbing, people associating you with Rangers and so on. Do you? I mean, is that a kind of bit of an urban myth, or did you ever have a real fondness for them? I read that your dad took you to Celtic and Rangers games in various matches over the years as a wee bit.
Well, this is true, Simon. My dad lived in Glasgow, lived in Jordan Hill in Glasgow, and he used to say to my mother, I'm taking him to a match this weekend. We go to Ibrox. First game I ever went to was Rangers Dundee United. But he would take me to Celtic Park as well. And I loved that. And for many years, I was honoured to grow up and be able to go to matches with him. He liked Rangers. My dad, Robbie, liked Rangers. But would also leave me to make my own mind up. And sure, I grew up and I used to think Rangers, what a huge club. But my God, I used to go and watch Celtic as well, watch Jinky Johnstone and Bobby Murdoch and Billy McNeil. And I was so fortunate to sit with him watching Celtic as well. Giants of clubs. And, I've had many, many pals who have been Celtic. You're sitting next to one, Simon. John Hartson's another. Neil Lennon is another. Great guys. And I remember going back to Lisbon with Billy McNeil when I was at Scottish TV, and going to the stadium in Lisbon where the boys won it in '67, and I was honoured to hear Billy McNeil talk about his memory of that day and so on and so forth. Going back to Lisbon with Bertie Auld. I loved Bertie Auld.
Yeah.
He was fabulous. I wish he was still with us.
Yeah.
You must be the same, Frank.
Yeah,
I mean, these guys were great, and both the old firm have got a big place in my heart. I must be honest. The guy I miss, of course, Davy Cooper, and I can remember being in studio one day, Simon, at Scottish TV, saying, "Good evening, everybody." It was some European night, and with me in studio, former Rangers player Ray Wilkins and Davy Cooper in studio. I don't know if Ray was still playing with Rangers at the time, but Wilkins and Cooper were my studio guests. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
So I mean, the Old Firm, massive clubs. I tell people down here, have you ever been to an Old Firm game? And so many people say, no, one day I'll do it. So I don't know, it's up to them, but one day they should.
Well, do you know, it's nice getting a shout out for Jordan Hill. I'm a Jordan Hill guy myself. And before we finish, I need to mention the lads here in the Up Next studios as well, where we film Let Me Be Frank. I think there's a connection with you from many years ago. They might have been your neighbours, Graham and Alan. So
Yes. When we were doing the technical check to do this with the two of you, the two lads put the headsets on and I was talking to them. And apparently I used to play football with them in the neighbour's garden. And they remember, but they could both verify that unlike McAvenny, I was shit at football. I was terrible.
Well,
and they told me straight what they taught me, Simon.
It was him that gave me that photo that I sent you. She said, look at the state of me.
I was he yesterday.
I sent a photo down to the two boys with him. And he's going, my God.
But
I loved it. Yeah, I remember them. Yeah.
They're doing a wonderful job. Anyone who watches the podcast will see how great it looks. And which reminds me to say to everybody, hit the subscribe button, do the usual stuff, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram,
all the usual.
TikTok, all the lot. Jim, we could talk all night.
Yeah.
With pair of you, I'm sure could talk all night, but time is catching up with us.
Time is catching up, and it's just thank you so much for coming on, Jim. It's an absolute pleasure.
It's a great pleasure, Frank. I'll mention it tomorrow live on TalkSPORT with the man George.
Listen, if you do that would be just that would be that would be us made, wouldn't it? If Simon Jordan and Jim White mention the Let Me Be Frank podcast, we can retire.
I'll die happy, man.
Simon, consider it done. It's getting mentioned tomorrow. The Let Me Be Frank podcast. It's an honour.
You're an absolute star. Well, listen, time has caught up with us. Thanks again, and hopefully, you never know, next time you're up in Glasgow, we maybe get you in the studio in person. That would be great.
For sure. Great work. Simon, thank you. Frank.
All the best.
Jim, thanks very much, pal.
Thanks.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be back again with another episode of Let Me Be Frank next week. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.